I'm not a big man. I'm not. But I once was a big deal. It's not a tall story, I promise. I was a big tax collector. I collected big taxes, and I collect just a little for these little pockets of mine. Little by little, my wealth grew big, and as it did, my circle of life, it grew wider and larger. People queued to be my big friends. Sure, they would pay a little tribute for my friendship, but what friendship doesn't come at a cost? I would too ease their burden of the big bills coming their way. It helped them, it helped me a little. Little by little, my wealth grew tall, as did my reputation and my reach. I could have anything I wanted, anything at all. As I grew, as my wealth grew, as I reached further and higher up the tree of life inside, my heart grew as small as a mustard seed. With so much around me, so much that I could buy anything. I could afford it all, but I did not want it. My heart did not grow. It became more and more restless, and it got smaller and smaller under this pile of wealth. Then I heard of Matthew, leaving the profession, abandoning his wealth, like a lunatic running after this Galilean preacher. The stories ran ahead of them. Fish and bread for the thousands, healing for the broken, cleansing for the defiled, and even life for the dead. Well, I wasn't a big man. I'm not a big man, but I sat on my considerable wealth, well invested, well produced, well laid, and well founded. But I was not at rest. The disquiet in my little heart grew to a greater height than that of the sycamore tree that shadowed me. I heard Jesus was coming to Jericho, and the noise and the depth of the crowd, it was, well, beyond a size that is convenient for someone of my diminutive stature. But the tree, the tall tree, and though I'm not a big man, I climbed taller and taller. And heads over the other people, I leaned down over the road. Looking down, I could see the Galilean preacher. I saw him approach. He would pass under me. Wait, he was stopping under me. Then he looked up. His eyes looked directly at mine into the tree. He spoke into the depths of my heart, past the wealth, past the layers of leisure and pleasure, past the disquiet of my soul. Zacchaeus, he said, come down. He knew my name? How did he know my name? What would this teacher have to rebuke me? Zacchaeus, he said again, come down. The crowd cheered, not kindly, and suddenly I felt vulnerable. I'm not a big man, but this crowd was, they could have killed me. Zacchaeus, come down. I need to have dinner at your house tonight. Was he confused? Now the unfriendly crowd cheered, turned from me onto this guy, Jesus. My house? Surely he was mistaken. No, for it seemed to be his plan all along. He sat at my house, he sat at my table and ate my fancy food and drank my nice wine and talked to me as a friend, telling us all of God's great kingdom, of the lonely and the loved. In my sinful house, this man of God sat and sharing my sorrows and my joys. I said, if I've wronged anyone, I will pay them back fourfold. He kissed my tear-stained eyes. He called me a son of Abraham and told me that salvation was here in my house. Me, a man once lost, but now found. I am not a big man, but I tell you, in that moment, I was taller than I had ever felt in my life, taller than the sycamore tree itself, no longer in the shadows, for the light of the world had finally come into my house.
Cool, thanks John. Let's give him a hand. Kia ora, my name is Caleb. For those of you who don't know me, I've been at TBC for nearly 10 years now actually. I help out with the intermediates most Sundays. And my wife Marissa and I are actually running an alpha course at the moment. We're only 1 week in, so if you want to join up, there's still plenty of time. Little plug just there. But yeah, talk to me after if you're keen. But as you probably gathered, we're talking about Zacchaeus today. I think this is actually a story about our greatest need. And I want to explain that in a moment, but before we do that, let's just read the passage. All right, so if you've got your Bibles, or it's on your phone, or it'll be up on the screen as well, hopefully, turn to Luke 19, verse 1 to 10. So, is it on the screen? I realise I don't have it written here. Let me find it. Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. By the way, I just want to say I'm not 100% sure if it's Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus. I'm going to switch between both, so if you have a favorite, I'm sorry, I probably won't stick to it. But Zacchaeus, old mate Zach, or call him any of these things. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. "Zacchaeus," he said, "quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today." Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. "He's gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner," they said. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, "I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I've cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much." Jesus responded, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost." So I heard this quote once by a pastor called Timothy Keller. And he said that our biggest desire or need in life as human beings is to be fully known and truly loved, all right? Fully known and truly loved. Now, I guess we can sum this up in the word acceptance maybe, all right? So we all want to be accepted. To be fully known and truly loved is to be accepted at our deepest level. And I'm sure all of us can relate to the need for acceptance to some degree. It's part of being human to want people to like us, right? Like, when I look at my life, I do a lot of things in order for people to like me, I suppose. Even just like coming to church in the morning, right? As I cross the road, there's cars that stop at the crossing for me. I give them a little wave, just trying to be friendly, trying to be likable. We get to the door, someone's, you reach the door at the same time as someone else. No, you go first, let them go through first. When I get takeaways, the person says, "Oh, enjoy your food." I'm like, "Thanks, you too." Look, I'm sure we've all done this, but we all have this need for acceptance, and I think we often do things in the hope. I know I do things in the hope other people like me, because if I'm completely honest, when other people like me, it's easier to like myself, right? I think hopefully we can all agree to that to some degree, which is I think why a lot of people's worst nightmare is being like the odd one out. Like if you go to a fancy dress party, you're all dressed up as your favorite cartoon character. You get there, turns out it's not a fancy dress party. Like, that's an awful feeling. Or even, much more relatable for this room actually, communion. If you're in communion, it's silent, and you take that sip of the juice and it goes down the wrong way. And you start coughing and you're trying to be silent and trying to not make a disturbance, but you're coughing your lungs out, and it's just, we all hate that feeling, right? I remember particularly this one time for me, many years ago, I was at Easter camp, right? And for those of you who don't know what Easter camp is, well, the name's pretty self-explanatory, but it's obviously a camp. It's down at Mystery Creek, and most of the youth from Baptist churches all around the North Island go there. So it's really big. There's like 5,000 people, young people and leaders. And this one particular Easter camp, we had these morning and evening meetings. So there's like 5,000 people jammed into this huge auditorium, and we were learning a haka, all right? So morning and evening, we were learning this haka until the last evening where we were going to perform it, right? And I gotta say, being in a 5,000 person haka is one of the coolest experiences you ever get. It's one of the times, I'll be honest, I felt pretty tough. It's about as tough as a skinny white boy like me can feel. So it was pretty cool. So I remember when we were gonna perform this, a lot of the boys, all start taking their shirts off, running up to the front. So I look around, all right, rip off my shirt, fold it neatly, put it on my chair, and run up to the front. And we all start performing this massive haka, and it was an amazing experience, all right? It truly was. It was really cool. And we're all hyped on adrenaline afterwards. Everyone's going back to their seats, and people are, putting their shirts on, getting themselves sorted. And so I go back to my seat, and I see my shirt's gone. It's not there. I start asking the people around. I'm like, where's my t-shirt? They're all like, I don't know, I haven't seen it. And for a while, it's kind of okay, because everyone else is still putting their shirts on, talking to the people around them, all of that. And so, I'm searching around until I suddenly realize that actually everyone else has gone silent. Someone else has come out onto the stage. Everyone else in the room, all 5,000 people, all sitting down now, looking ahead, and it's just me standing there with no t-shirt on, like some kind of confused naked mole rat. Man, it was so awkward. It was a terrible experience. And I think we can all relate to this experience of being the odd one out, being, the one that everyone's looking at and laughing. And I think our friend Zacchaeus knew that feeling well, right? From what we know of him, he was the kind of guy who people avoided. He stuck out in a crowd. He wasn't really liked. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. And what you need to know about tax collectors in those days, tax collectors collected the taxes for the occupying power, the Romans, but tax collectors were always from the occupied people, right? So Zacchaeus was a Jew collecting taxes from other Jews, his friends, his family, the people in his community. And the way tax collectors earned their money, earned is an interesting word for it, is that they would take the tax that Rome required and they would add their own amount on top for themselves, which meant that a lot of tax collectors added a lot on top of what Rome actually asked for and made themselves very wealthy. Zacchaeus was one of these people, right? He was growing wealthy literally at the expense of his friends, his family, his community around him, right? So the Jewish religious elite, they considered tax collectors traitors and sinners and scum. And because those guys were kind of the top dogs in that culture, that was kind of the mindset that everyone had, all right? No one liked tax collectors. And to become a tax collector, I can imagine you probably needed a few key qualities, all right? Number one, you had to be greedy, all right? You had to have no qualms about taking more than you needed. Why does it get a cheer? All right. Number two, you had to have a thick skin. You had to not really care what people thought about you because people weren't going to like you. And number three, I actually think you had to have maybe a bitterness or even a disdain for your own people, because you were like, okay, put this into perspective. Most Jewish people were hoping, praying, believing that Rome was the occupying power was going to be overthrown. While as a tax collector, you were literally profiting off the fact that Rome was in power. and you were making the most of that, making yourself rich. You were pretty much turning your back on your culture, your religion, your family and friends. So why would anyone take this job, you might wonder? Well, in the passage it mentioned, and as John very skillfully displayed, Zacchaeus is rich, right? So what you lost in friends, social standing, and a clear conscience, you could make up for with some cold, hard cash. Now, we only know a few things about Zacchaeus. He was rich, we just talked about that. He was a tax collector, we talked about that. It also mentions that he's small in stature. Now, the Bible has a tendency to downplay things. I don't know if you've noticed this, but like earlier in the book of Luke, Jesus goes out into the wilderness. He's out in the wilderness for 40 days, and it says that during those 40 days, he did not eat. Then it says, after 40 days, Jesus was hungry. Look, if I miss lunch, I'm hungry. Jesus hadn't eaten for 40 days. Like, if I hadn't eaten for 40 days, I'd probably be, I don't know, chewing on my shoes or something. Like, that's next level hungry, right? So the Bible has this tendency to downplay things, to understate things. And so when it says Zacchaeus was small in stature or short, I imagine that this means he was very short. Now, it might have meant he was a dwarf. Now, don't go out of here saying that Caleb says Zacchaeus is a dwarf. No, we don't know that. But we know that he's short enough that Luke felt it was worth mentioning. All right? And so it's also important to remember that in that culture, people who were different were given a hard time. And so Zacchaeus, not only has he are people not a fan of him being a tax collector, but he's possibly also had people treat him badly throughout his whole life because he just is different to people around him. So he's this guy, he's short, he's a tax collector, he's wealthy, he's someone who probably hasn't felt very accepted by those around him. And so he's doing the best he can to basically rip everyone else off so he can benefit. He feels trodden on, so he's treading on other people, trying to build himself up and find acceptance in his own eyes. So, because he's not being, you remember what I said at the start, acceptance, right? He's not being accepted by other people. He's building up this identity or image of being a rich man in order to feel like he can accept himself, to justify himself to himself. Now, hear me out here. But I actually think we all build up identities to some degree, all right? It's normal. Like, we focus on the things that make us special, make us unique, make us different to the people around us, and we often focus on them and work at them so that we can get better at them. It's like our natural abilities, the stuff that you were good at in school. For a lot of you, you were good at it in school, so then you went to uni and you studied that subject, whatever it was in uni, and then you probably went into a career in that field, and that career comes with a title, and that all kind of becomes part of your identity. It can be also the same with relationships. For a lot of people, they define themselves by their relationship status or even lack of it. That's how people see themselves. It could be anything, really. People define themselves and build identities on all sorts of things. It could be that you're a traveler, or you're an environmental activist, or you're a musician, or you're a gamer, you're a church elder, you're a bogan that drives a 90s turbo diesel. I don't know. But I just want to point out there's nothing wrong with any of these things, right? There's nothing wrong with any of them. But we can build an identity based around them. And look, let me just speak from my own experience here, right? So I didn't realize it at the time, but I actually did this with my last job, all right? The last job I had, I worked for this group called Attitude, and I was going all around the country delivering health presentations in schools, all right? And I learned how to speak and act in a certain way in order to do effective presentations. How I saw myself became based off how well I was doing in those. If I did bad presentations, I would question myself. I'd question whether I should have this job. It would rock me pretty hard. And if I did great presentations, then I would be stoked with that. And I would bask in the compliments, read the positive feedback over and over. I was proud to tell people about my job, the places I visited, the interesting things that happened. And then that all kind of came to an end towards the end of last year, because Attitude nearly went under. They got bought out by a different company. Some people got let go. That included me. right? So I had to find a job quickly. I found one doing gardening work in Waikumete Cemetery. So my LinkedIn title went from Caleb Slaney attitude presenter to Caleb Slaney assistant gardener. That's right, not even gardener, assistant gardener. Took a bit of a hit. Now, where before, I loved the opportunity to talk about my job. You know, people ask, how's work going? And I'd be like, yeah, and I'd talk about what I did and the places I was going and the talks I was doing. And then after that, I'd say, well, at the moment I'm gardening, but I used to, and talk about what I used to do. I just couldn't accept that I was doing something different because being an attitude presenter was part of my identity. I saw it as part of who I am, and it felt like that was gone. And in the same way, we see Zacchaeus build up this identity as a wealthy man so that he can justify himself to others, but also a lot to himself. Just to some degree, I liked and accepted myself based on the fact I had this cool job with the title of attitude presenter. He liked and accepted himself because he was the chief tax collector. Now, you might be sitting here being like, well, I have a job, or I'm in a relationship, I have such and such hobbies. How do I know if that's defining my identity, or if it's just stuff I do? And I think the answer lies in how you respond when that thing's taken away. It's when things go wrong that we discover, I guess, what we lean on in life and where our self-acceptance is found, you know? Like, if your self-acceptance is found in having a romantic partner's affection, then a breakup really exposes that. Or if it's your sporting ability, it takes one injury to take that away from you. If it's your job, well, as I said, for me, I felt completely lost when I got let go of that. I didn't know where to turn. The thing is, if we try and find our acceptance in any of these things, it's not going to fully meet the need we have deep down. See, Zacchaeus, we see this because he's not content with this life he's built up for himself. And you can see why he's not content. It's because here in the story, he's searching for Jesus. He's off trying to find him. And Jesus says in a few places how difficult it is for rich people to enter the kingdom of God. When people have a material wealth, they often don't feel like they need Jesus or they need help, they need anything else, and so they don't go searching for him. But in Zacchaeus' case, his life isn't meeting that need. He's searching for something more. He's probably heard of other tax collectors going and finding Jesus. He's wondering what he's missing out on. So here we find him amongst the crowds, right? Trying to see Jesus. And because of his height or lack of it, he can't see above the crowd. This is where our friend Zach makes a crucial decision. He climbs up a tree. And we all know the story, he climbs up a tree. But to me, I've never thought about it because I grew up in the church. I've read, like a kid's Bible since I was born, and there were always pictures of Zacchaeus up a tree. It was just a normal thing. But, him being up a tree is actually quite a remarkable thing. Firstly, he's not a popular man. People don't like him. It could be possible that there were people in the crowd purposely preventing him from getting through to Jesus because they knew who he was. They didn't like him. And so by climbing up a tree, he's making himself more prominent. All right? He's not just allowing Jesus to see him. He's allowing all these other angry taxpayers. He's sticking out in the crowd, but like me with no shirt on at Easter camp, except I hadn't committed tax fraud. The other thing about climbing up the tree is that it's not like that was a normal cultural thing to do, all right? It's not like people climbed up trees more back then. They didn't. If anything, it was probably the opposite. It was very undignified to climb up a tree. I was trying to think of a way to explain this. And I was like, okay, I want us all to imagine something. Just imagine that you're, walking down Queen Street. You're walking down Queen Street and there's a big crowd because someone's busking. And you're like, wow, that's a very popular busker. There's a lot of people. There's hundreds of people. And then you notice that there's someone so keen to see what this person's doing that they've climbed onto a roof of a bus stop. This person up on the roof of a bus stop. And you realize it's not just some teenage hooligan. No, it's a businessman in like a full suit, you know? It's like a middle-aged businessman. He's got his briefcase. He's standing up there fully dressed for a meeting. He looks like the kind of guy who would say the word stipulate or something. And he's like, he's up there on the roof of a bus stop. And you're like, why is this guy up here? It's like that's probably the most modern equivalent I can think of to Zacchaeus being up a tree. So it's not normal, it's undignified, he's embarrassing himself, he's setting himself up for ridicule, but he's so intent on Jesus. There's a description later on about a couple of disciples on the road to Emmaus after Jesus had died, he had resurrected, and he appears to them and walks with them, and they don't recognize him. But afterwards they say, when they find out that, we talked with Jesus that whole time, they say, didn't our hearts burn within us? And I reckon that Zacchaeus' heart was burning within him. He probably didn't even know why he was doing it. He wouldn't have been able to tell you exactly why he was up that tree. He just knew he needed to see Jesus. He knew there was something missing, that Jesus had something he needed, and he was going to go to whatever lengths needed to get there. Unfortunately, Jesus didn't see him and he went home sad at the end. No, I'm just saying who's away. Sure enough, Jesus comes up to the tree and he speaks to Zacchaeus, right? This is the moment where everything changes. He says, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. This is profound. All right, what are those two words I spoke about at the start? We talked about acceptance, but what was acceptance? It was being fully known and truly loved. Jesus covers both in this one sentence. He says his name, Zacchaeus. Immediately, Zacchaeus is known. He realized Jesus knows who he is. That's huge. And then comes the love, the acceptance, where he says, I must stay at your house today. So for once, Zacchaeus is someone's first choice of friend, and not because he's bribed him or shown off his wealth. If anything, he's made himself look silly by climbing up this tree. But in this moment, Zacchaeus feels fully known and truly loved. And this is a game changer for him. All his striving and pursuit of wealth and power is undone as what he was really searching for the whole time finds him. Now, you might be sitting here being like, I don't know, I think you read into this a bit much, like it's just one sentence that Jesus says. But no, this one sentence completely changes him. And you can see in the way that he responds. Because the people around, well, actually you can see because of what happens next, the way he responds, because the people around him, the crowd, they don't like Zacchaeus, right? They start complaining. They go, Jesus, going to his house, he's a sinner, he's a liar, he ripped me off, he stole my money. You know, they start complaining and getting upset that Jesus is going to his house. And we see this huge change in Zacchaeus and how he responds to that. You know, remember, this is a man who at every moment has done everything he can to stomp on others to get to the top of the ladder, right? And I think the fact that Zacchaeus didn't stay up that tree just a bit longer to go, Jesus come into my house, and rub it in to everyone's faces that he was the one getting chosen. I think the fact that he didn't do that is absolute proof that his heart had changed in that moment. Because what does he do? He climbs down and he says that he realizes that the crowd has a point, right? You know, they're not just haters. He has ripped people off. He has lied. He has cheated. He has taken more than he should. And he feels it accepted enough in himself and what Jesus has said to be able to admit that. And to be able to actually say to the people around him and to Jesus, if I have defrauded anyone, I'll pay it back fourfold. He's willing to go above and beyond to pay back for the wrongs that he's done. Now, I want to quickly just stop here and look at the order of what things happen. So Jesus calls Zacchaeus by name. He says he's coming to his house. He's indicating a friendship, All right? This draws a bit of a negative response from the crowd. Zacchaeus then says in response that he'll make amends for what he's done. I think way too often we think that it has to be the other way around. We think that we need to make amends before Jesus wants to be our friend. The truth is, Jesus came to Zacchaeus, he wanted to be his friend before he had made the amends. Jesus came and spoke to Zacchaeus. He accepted him. He met that need of wanting to be fully known and truly loved. And at that point, Zacchaeus was free to let go of all the stuff he had been building for himself. And he was actually free to be able to make amends for what he had done at that point. Now, I want to say something that I think is really important. I really want you to remember this, all right? Christianity is not behavior modification. Christianity is not behavior modification. Sin isn't just behaviors. It's so much deeper than that. Zacchaeus sinned. Yes, he ripped people off in order to build up this identity for himself, and we tend to look at the lying and stealing and cheating of what he did as sin. And yes, it is sin, all right? Don't get me wrong, it is sin. However, if we look at sin as like a disease, which I totally believe it is, sin's like a disease, the lying, cheating, stealing, they're symptoms, right? It's like when you have a flu, right? You have a runny nose. That runny nose is a symptom of your virus that your body's trying to fight. The runny nose isn't the disease, it's a symptom of the disease. Zacchaeus ripping people off was a symptom of his deeper sin. What was that deeper sin? Was building up an identity for himself to find acceptance in his own eyes apart from God. I think so many Christians are building up idolatrous identities for themselves, but because they don't have obvious sin symptoms, they don't even realize it. You see, Zacchaeus climbed up that tree to reach Jesus because he knew he was living in sin. It had obvious effects. The people around him were only too happy to point it out, and I'm sure his conscience reminded him too. However, who were the other people in this story? We don't see much like in the way of other people. However, there is the crowd. They're the ones who complained when Jesus chose Zacchaeus. Some of them may have been religious leaders, devout Jews. A lot of them probably lived very good lives, the kind of lives that earned acceptance from the people around them. However, in their complaint against Zacchaeus, we see a little sin symptom. All right, is that like maybe a little bit of bitterness, maybe a little bit of entitlement, like a sneaky little attitude that actually they deserved to meet Jesus more than he did? So we have Zacchaeus who's built up this identity for himself to find the acceptance he's looking for. It doesn't meet that need, so he goes searching. He ends up giving up his dignity, his pride, ultimately everything he's worked for up until this point, because Jesus meets him where he's at, fulfills that deep desire. Zacchaeus is changed. We also have the members of the crowd who stood in front of Jesus on their own merits, each with the identity they built up for themselves of good people who followed the laws, treated others well, avoided sinful behavior. They accepted each other and justified themselves through this. What they had really done, though, was built up pride in their heart and deceived themselves into believing that they deserved to be Jesus' friends. Their sin disease was just as real as Zacchaeus's, but their symptoms were so much more subtle. TBC, every single one of us, right, all have the same need that Zacchaeus had. We all deep down want to be fully known and truly loved. We all want to be accepted and to be able to accept ourselves. My question to you is, how are you meeting that need? Maybe for some of you, you do see a bit of Zacchaeus in yourself. You know you're running after things that will not satisfy at the moment. Maybe it is money, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's porn, maybe it's status in the eyes of others, material possessions, things that are obviously and clearly sin. You know it's not working. You're desperate for Jesus to meet that need in your heart, to be fully known and truly loved by your Creator. And as I'm saying this, it's resonating with you. Then for others of you, you're not like Zacchaeus. And you might be a little bit insulted by any comparison. You're a good church attending person. You have standards you live by and things you do on principle and don't do on principle. You're reasonably satisfied with the person you are and the life you have built or are building for yourself. And for sure, you're not perfect. You know, none of us are, but at least you don't, drink too much or have a short temper or gossip about others, etc. The truth is, if you're sitting here and being really real, being fully honest, you would actually say, yeah, if I was there that day and Jesus was passing by, I probably wouldn't have climbed up a tree to try and meet him. You might have joined the crowd, but you are happy to admit that actually you wouldn't have been that crazy to actually climb up a tree and lose your dignity doing such a thing. Then you might just have as much of a sin disease in you as Zacchaeus did. Now, I've just given us all two options. Both of them end up with the idea that you've got a sin disease, that you're a sinner. So before you start throwing rotten fruit at me or push the fire alarm again to get us all out of here, I just want to give you some good news, all right? I want to give you some good news. Jesus wasn't surprised by Zacchaeus' sin. He wasn't even surprised by the sin of the people in the crowd. Jesus was on a mission to address all of that sin in everyone, not to just modify behavior, stop bad people from doing bad things. No, that's a very small part of it. He wants to meet the need of deep, true acceptance in every person's heart. And he knew that only a very select few would actually climb a tree in order to try and reach him. He knew that most people wouldn't be bothered. So he decided to be the one to climb the tree to reach everyone who didn't. We read a few chapters later, Jesus allows himself to be lifted up on the remnants of a tree above a crowd. He was nailed to a wooden cross. He lost his dignity doing it. He subjected himself to ridicule, where Zacchaeus climbed up with the faith that although he was giving up everything, Jesus would meet him. Jesus hung up there, knowing very well that there were people in that crowd who would reject him, who still would not accept him. They would still choose to build their own identity apart from him. But in doing what he did, Jesus gave every person who had built up a life and identity to make themselves acceptable in their own eyes the opportunity to lay that down and experience being fully known and truly loved. Jesus was rejected so that we can be accepted. So if you're sitting here and you realize that deep down you've been longing for that acceptance, for that love, that you know that you can't even impress yourself, let alone impress God, then now's your opportunity to take that moment and tell him that. Remember, Jesus climbed the tree so that you don't have to. You don't have to sort out your life before you meet him. And then maybe for some of you, you're suddenly aware of this identity you've built up for yourself, making yourself acceptable in your own eyes. You never realized it was sin. Jesus has forgiveness waiting for you. Forgiveness, acceptance, and love. Today is your opportunity to find your true identity as a creation of the mighty Creator, a son or daughter of the everlasting Father, a friend of the Savior of the world. Before I finish, look, I just really want you to know that I'm not talking about some wishy-washy ideas. I'm talking about a practical reality, and I know this is real because I've experienced it in my own life. Like without even realizing, I had built up this identity so I could be acceptable in my own eyes. And it wasn't until God took some of it away that I realized what I'd been doing. Took it away through job loss, through other stuff. And that exposed it to me. And to be honest, I haven't instantly changed. What happened to Zacchaeus? Jesus said one sentence, he was a changed man. That doesn't happen to everyone. However, it's been a process. It's been a journey. For me, if you come to my house, you'll see post-it notes on my mirror in the bathroom that say stuff that remind me of who God's created me to be. how he sees me, who I am, his beloved son, his creation made in his image. And it's changed me, and it is changing me. Remember, Christianity isn't just behavior modification. It's a heart change. It's a soul renewal. It's becoming a new person with a new identity. What happened to Zacchaeus was instant, but for a lot of us, it's a process that takes time. And that process includes key moments like today. So if you feel your heart stirring, it's great. We actually have an opportunity now to actually just sit and respond. There's going to be a few minutes of just silence, just to sit, to think about the things you've heard. You can read what's on the screen, the verse. You can just sit and process and think about that, whether you want to open your Bible, whether you want to pray, I don't know. But I believe that God is wanting us to think about these things. What is your identity found in? Where do you find your acceptance? Is it time to trust Jesus to meet some of these needs? I'm just going to pray and then we'll have some silence. So, dear Lord, I thank you. I thank you that you meet our needs, that you created us with these needs so that you might meet them and fulfill them, Lord. I pray that each one of us would discover what it means to be fully known and truly loved. Please be here and speak to us during this time. Amen.